Some children grow up inside a room that never quite turns toward them. They are present for everything, the conversations, the routines, the noise of daily life. And yet, they exist just outside the line of attention, close enough to hear, far enough to be missed. No one tells them they don't matter. No one has to. They learn it in smaller ways, in words that trail off without response, in questions that pass over them, in conversations that end without checking if the child followed along. Nothing feels severe, which is why it stays. An ignored child doesn't grow up with pain they can point to. They grow up with the sense that presence is optional. At first, they try to anchor themselves. They speak during pauses. They bring something they hope will hold attention. They repeat themselves, once, maybe twice. When those efforts fade into the background, something loosens. They stop reaching forward. Instead, they begin to watch. Ignored children become quiet observers of human behavior. They notice who is answered immediately, who gets follow-up questions, whose emotions redirect the room. They also notice who doesn't. Slowly, they place themselves in that second category, not by decision, but by experience. They don't withdraw intentionally. They simply stop assuming entry is automatic. Over time, their relationship with their own voice changes. It feels intrusive, unnecessary, easy to abandon mid-thought. You may remember having something to say and deciding not to say it, not from fear, from habit. Ignored children often grow inward. Their inner world becomes rich and detailed, filled with thoughts that never need to be spoken. Externally, they become minimal. They learn how to exist without demanding recognition, how to listen without being noticed. They learn how to remain present without being registered. Adults often misread this. They see composure, independence, a child who doesn't need much. What they don't see is how expectation quietly collapsed. Expectation requires evidence, and evidence never arrived. So the child learns not to assume engagement. They don't expect follow-up questions. They don't assume curiosity. They don't anticipate being remembered in small ways. This creates a peculiar form of self-reliance, not the confident kind, the quiet kind, the kind that comes from knowing you'll likely process things alone, the kind built on absence, not strength. As the child grows older, this posture hardens. They wait rather than initiate. They observe rather than enter. They prepare for absence rather than presence, not because they dislike people, but because attention always felt borrowed. In adulthood, this shows up subtly, in how long it takes to speak in groups, in hesitation before reaching out, in pulling back the moment interest feels uncertain. Ignored children don't fear rejection, they expect indifference. And indifference is harder to argue with. It doesn't hurt loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It simply continues without you. By the time its impact is noticed, the behavior feels natural, unremarkable, just the way things are. But beneath that calm exterior is a history of moments where nothing happened. No response, no recognition, no interruption of the world to make room. That history doesn't disappear. It becomes the quiet backdrop of life. An ignored child doesn't grow up asking, "What do I feel?" They grow up asking, "Does it matter?" Because when attention is absent, experience loses its audience. And without an audience, expression begins to feel unnecessary. Over time, this shapes identity. Identity doesn't form in isolation. It forms through response, through reflection, through being seen and answered. When response is sparse, the self develops quietly, like a sentence that never quite finishes. The ignored child learns to rely on internal confirmation. They decide what things mean alone. They soothe themselves alone. They carry confusion without interruption. This creates someone who appears grounded, but is often unanchored. not lost, just undefined. As adults, ignored children often struggle to locate themselves in relationships. They don't instinctively know where they stand. They monitor tone, they read pauses, they measure distance, not because they're anxious, but because certainty was never modeled. They may notice how easily they step aside in groups, how naturally conversations move on without them, how often they assume others matter more to hear. This isn't humility, it's positioning. Ignored children learned early that occupying the center rarely lasted, so they learned how to exist at the edges without resentment. There is also a unique relationship with memory. Moments weren't marked as significant, so significance became unclear. Milestones passed without pause. Feelings went unnamed. Achievements were acknowledged briefly, if at all. As a result, life can feel continuous. Moments blur together. Nothing stands out enough to demand remembrance. This creates a muted sense of personal history, not emptiness, vagueness. You know things happened, you're just not sure which ones mattered. In adulthood, this affects desire. Wanting something deeply requires believing it will meet response. When response was rare, desire learns to stay quiet. You may hesitate to express needs, not because you expect refusal, but because expression feels inefficient. Why speak if nothing changes? This creates relationships where you're present but indistinct, where people appreciate your calmness, but don't quite know you. Closeness exists without depth. Others may describe you as private, low maintenance, independent. They may assume you prefer distance. What they don't see is the constant internal question: is this worth saying? Will this land anywhere? Ignored children also develop a unique form of self-control. They're rarely overwhelmed outwardly. They manage disappointment quietly. They absorb change without protest. But suppression has a cost. When experiences go unacknowledged, they don't disappear. They accumulate. And accumulation without release becomes heaviness. This can surface as numbness, restlessness, a sense of being disconnected from your own life. Not because life lacks meaning, but because meaning was rarely reinforced. Healing doesn't begin with becoming louder, or more assertive, or more visible. It begins with re-establishing response, with noticing what moves you, and letting it linger instead of passing through, with allowing moments to matter, even if no one else marks them. With learning that presence doesn't require permission, that your experiences don't need external confirmation to exist. Gradually, the ignored child reclaims authorship. They choose what matters. They decide when something deserves space. They allow themselves to interrupt the flow. Not forcefully, not dramatically, simply deliberately. Over time, relationships change. Connection becomes shared, not waited for. Participation replaces observation. The ignored child doesn't erase who they became. Their quiet perception remains, their depth, their steadiness. But they stop living as an afterthought in their own life. They begin to take up space, not because they demand it, but because they finally recognize they were always allowed to be there.